Leaders in the Arena. My name is Jenny Whitener, the CEO of Bridge Innovate, and it's our pleasure to welcome you here today. Leaders in the Arena is a webinar and podcast series dedicated to sharing inspirational stories from colleagues and leaders in the arena. We at Bridge Innovate focus on empowering teams to lead, think, and problem solve differently. This series is a part of helping others to do that by sharing these inspirational stories. Today, we are very excited to have with us Tabitha Kapic. Tabitha is the Director of Innovation at the Chalmers Center, and she's going to be talking to us about innovation at the edges, how community challenge sparks ingenuity. Tabitha and I have had the great pleasure of being friends and colleagues for many years. She's the Director of Innovation at the Chalmers Center, has been there for over 6 years. Prior to that, she did a consulting stint with Bridge, which was a great pleasure to have her with us for several years. And she's also adjunct professor at Covenant College, and prior to that, president of MedAir. She's been making change happen, ladies and gentlemen, around the world for many years. So it is a magnificent pleasure to have you as our guest today to share some stories on innovation and how you're making that happen around the world. Welcome, Tabitha.
Thank you, Jenny. I was just doing the math in my head. We've been friends for over 10 years. We have a decade under our belts. And of course, I tell everyone you taught me everything I know. So it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Great to have you. So you talk about Chalmers, and that Chalmers is focused on igniting innovation around the world. Share with our audience today about that. How do you do it? What's your philosophy around it? Just sort of ground us.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, before I jump into who the Chalmers Center is and how we're using innovation, I find it helpful to let you know how I define innovation. And, you're looking at a picture on the screen of the first human landing on the moon. And that, of course, took a ton of technological innovation, people with PhDs and engineering degrees. But I'm actually more interested in what happened 3 years later, because it wasn't until 1972 that we first put wheels on suitcases. So when I talk about innovation, a wheel is definitely a piece of technology, but we sometimes think about the moonshots and the lunar landings. At Chalmers, we're working in very grassroots contexts. So we're more wheels on suitcase, finding those sorts of innovations. And how do I know if an innovation happened? It's really in looking back that I know. We talk about at the Chalmers Center, did the end beneficiary did someone experience relief, delight, or hope? And does the behavior change sustain over time? So that's kind of our working definition of innovation. The Chalmers Center was founded over 25 years ago to really help the church and nonprofits end poverty. It is poverty alleviation, and we do a lot of training and equipping of others on the front line. And just to clarify, another little definition is, how do we define poverty? Like, from where do all the roots of all the problems in the world arise? And it's really these three things: broken people, broken systems, demonic forces. There bad things happen, and it's not just any one of these things, it's a combination. So back in the day, Brian Fickert, who started the Chalmers Center, wrote a book called When Helping Hurts. And that did create some angst in the poverty alleviation space, because people realized, oh, there is a wrong way to do this. But then Brian Fickert said, okay, what if we add design thinking into the mix so that people can create the right way to do poverty alleviation? So our process has basically three streams of thought. It's God's story of change, because we are a Christian-based, faith-based organization. So God's story of change is very important to how we approach poverty alleviation. Asset-based approaches, which I'll say a little bit more about, and then winding in that design thinking so that people could create ministries or outreaches in their communities that really help people. But as your listeners will know, as all of you will know, design thinking can be really complex. It has a lot of parts to it, and it's very helpful to have someone like Bridge Innovate and Jenny and her team lead you through. But we weren't going to be able to have that. And we were starting and building our process with folks that may be oral preference learners, meaning they might not be literate in any language. So we had to kind of rethink the tools. And for me, it was a really good use case for designing to the edges, where you really design something for extreme users and find that that gives you benefits for the core, for most people. And we really played this out over 5 years. So we stripped back that process as basic as we could get it so that people living on $1 or $2 a day could use it. And it's just 3 steps: discover, design, do. And you just go through this process till you get to the solution. I might talk about our tools later, Jenny, if you want to. But again,
Sure.
we are just, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I love the simplicity of the discover, design, and do. It's very easy to remember, and I can see how it could just be a toolkit that could equip anyone at any level. So talk to us more about the tools, just at a high level. I don't want to derail you, but these are pretty basic.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it usually when we're doing this, instead of something that you might say is their current state model, we have participatory mapping, which just means, hey, why don't you get together and draw your neighborhood or draw your community? Sometimes we're working with people who are actually living in a space together. Sometimes at a higher level, we're working with nonprofits who are managing multiple spaces and remote locations. So it's just like mapping, what is your community? What do you have? What are the gaps? And then let's understand the problem. And then in the design phase, very familiar, it says HCW questions, which is only a translation thing. Normally in innovation, we want to ask how might we questions, but because we
Right.
translate into different languages, it's how can we? So the translators tell us that that translates better.
Good.
Brainstorming, we use role play prototypes because, again, we design this for people who may not be literate and may not have a lot of materials at hand to build something. So role play works great. And then project plans, they carry out the solution in community and get feedback. So the distinction that we have, the kind of distinctives, are those 3 disciplines combined. A big thing for me, though, is the design team composition. In the West, people can sometimes go into a closed door room, create programs, and then come out and hand them to the community. But at the Chalmers Center, our approach is always listening to the people that we are serving alongside. So we want to do ministry with people, not at them or for them. So actual people in the community, those who are experiencing material poverty, are part of this design process. For instance, if you are creating an outreach or an innovation for single mothers, I really hope you have some single moms on your design team. And then the process itself is really fast. Of course, you can do innovation processes over a long period of time, but this one is not quite a sprint. It's 8 to 9 weeks. But it's a good amount of time for people to get moving.
Well, Tabitha, when you say it's a sprint that's like 8 to 9 weeks, are you actually on site, on the ground for that period of time?
That's a great question, and you just led right into the slides. So we sort of have 2 ways that we deliver Innovate. One is more of a coaching consulting online, where we take them through Innovate through Zoom, and that's the Chalmers staff doing that. But when we're working in the majority world, like you see here, we are actually training of trainers. We're equipping people that then go lead groups through or facilitate. So you'll see in the upper left-hand picture, these are facilitators that were already working with Chalmers. We train them over 3 days. They go back, they lead groups through the process and the steps, but still the community, they're the facilitators. The community themselves are the design team.
Okay. So the way you're getting that scale is by doing a train the trainer. So your investment with that leadership team that's local is 3 days. And then you're using that leadership team to launch these multiple week projects and guide them. And you're supporting them through Zoom so that you can stay connected. Is that right?
Absolutely. And here's a good example of that. This was a training we did in Nicaragua. We were working with a church denomination that is throughout Latin America. We're still working with them, but all the people you see on the stairs and in front in this picture are leaders of house churches, and they went back into their communities after the 3 days of being trained. They have a guide, a facilitator guide that's a script, and they meet 1 hour a week with the communities, and the communities then over that 9 weeks, they design and carry out some project in their community. It could be as simple as clearing a lot. I'll tell you one story from Nicaragua if I can.
Please, please.
So one group, they started working on, when they looked at their community, looked at their assets, they started working on the challenge of addiction and homelessness in their community in Nicaragua. And they had discovered through asset mapping, figuring out what all their resources, what they already had, is that they had sewing machines and they had people that knew how to teach sewing. So they took the people that were struggling with addiction and homelessness and started a sewing class.
Wow.
Throughout these weeks, a local textile owner, business owner, came to them and said, I will hire whoever graduates from your sewing class. So something that started out about addiction and homelessness became a job creation innovation
Fantastic.
without external resources. So the Chalmers Center is not giving money to this community. We're training their people to be facilitators,
Right.
but there's no external money, which is incredibly sustainable in the majority world.
Well, and I really love how you're focusing on their assets. I think oftentimes at some of the work that we did together on thriving communities here in the Chattanooga region was kind of focused on this, where I think many times communities or organizations have assets that they take for granted or they don't see them as assets.
So right.
And once you help illuminate those assets, they begin to think, how might we use them differently, right, in order to create change? And so what a beautiful process that you've organized and launched there so that they can really tap what they have.
Yeah, and it is very, it's an aha moment for people when a community sits and starts with assets and resources instead of challenges. Because what I feel like I need to say to folks in the majority world is you actually can solve your own problems with what you have. And what I feel like I have to say to the Western world is you need to listen to the people in the community. So you kind of have to have both sides of the coin there. But yes, you're right. Asset-based innovations based on what the community is already good at and already has are much stronger, more innovative, and longer lasting than if you just do need-based. Like, what's the problem here? Let's fix it. Talk about what you have before you talk about the problem.
Interesting.
We've been able to
In the forefront of their mind before you deeply go into the problem.
Exactly.
That's already in their mindset.
Exactly, because otherwise we get trapped, especially in the nonprofit world, into scarcity of resources. So it's just like, how can I make this attractive to an outside funder? And as we've seen the dismantling of the international nonprofit sector, or government-funded nonprofit sector, this is going to be more and more important globally, that people are able to use their own resources. So we've done, I'm just going to check my time to see how many stories I can tell. We've worked with Ukrainian pastors and ministry leaders. It was an honor to be able to train these 50 folks and have them go back during a war zone and use this process during a conflict. I originally trained this group in 2023, but I went back in December of last year and met with them again. they continue to do incredible work. This is pictures from them using the Innovate process. In the bottom left, it was used in a police academy in Ukraine to try to get ahead of domestic abuse issues with returning soldiers, which I thought was such a beautiful thing to get ahead of and have a plan for. There's been many ministries started to people left behind in bombed out cities that mainly it's the elderly, disabled that are left behind. And these churches drive every week and sit with them. There's even one church that I can't even mention who they are because they actually visit injured Russian soldiers within Ukraine. It's a beautiful work that we've been able to be a part of. This is just some of our work in West Africa. Again, not Chalmers, but people we've equipped. You never know if a process is going to work or if everyone will just do the example in the book. They don't. These people use the process to fit their community resources and challenges. So everything from mosquito eradication to crop diversification, rain pond gardens. It's just really beautiful. And the thing that we're doing in the majority world is building creative confidence so that the folks in the community see themselves as change agents.
When you talk about building creative confidence, one of the things I've seen over the years is how one of the major byproducts of that is hope. And what fuel hope can be to tackle some of the most extraordinary challenges. If I have hope, if I believe that there could be a better way,
Yes.
better outcome, and certainly as a faith-based organization, a key part of that is your faith. But inspiring that creative confidence is really a catalyst for bringing hope back to a community. And then I think what's so great about the Discover, Design, Do is that you're helping them see that through the process to actually achieve, right? How do you start the process and rather than just walking away with an idea and I don't know where to go next, right? I love that.
Yeah, and we've found that even for those groups that don't quite finish all 9 weeks, because things happen with these groups and they have transformation in their community, even going through the process partially. So you're so right about hope. I just think of hope as the belief that things can change. And when you're under the constant pressure of material poverty, it is hard to keep believing that. But once you go through this process, yes, just like I said at the beginning, I know innovation is happening when someone experiences relief, hope, delight, and it extends over time. So this was in Ecuador. I could tell you stories about that. We were just last April in Ghana and Togo again. And then just last month, I was in the West Nile region of Uganda, which so many stories from that. This is the most remote location we've ever been to. It was only accessible by bush plane and 4x4s. But look at how beautiful this hotel they found was. It was the only one in the area, but you're looking at a group of Ugandans, but also we trained for the first time about 15% of this group was refugees from South Sudan.
Wow.
And these are communities that you've got Ugandans. I kind of think of it like the southern border of the US. You have communities that have been there, and then right next to them, there are UNHCR settlements with people from DR Congo, South Sudan. And the potential for tension is there. But what's beautiful about this is us working with Compassion International, which you may have heard of them with. In fact, in Ukraine, that was Hope International. This is Compassion International. So we work with other organizations. But the thing that unites them is the children's programs at the churches. And so they can come on that common ground, and they're just about to start their design groups the first week of September.
Okay. So you need to train the trainer with them.
We did train the trainer with them. And through the process, we model the lessons on day one. And you would love this, Jenny. They use the training venue as their shared community and go around. This, again, something I learned from you, an experience point. They go around the training venue and look for resources and challenges. They go through the whole process. Day two, they practice, they do lessons and repeat the process again.
Right.
So on day two, here's some of the pivots that I really like to see. Because if you go from drowning victims, and I'll explain this a little bit, I know that's shocking, but a challenge this one group, an EGE, that they really have is drowning victims, especially children. When they did like the 5 whys and used our challenge tree,
Hmm.
they realized that one of the problems was the cultural practice of polygamous marriage because men were spread too thin. There was no one to rescue their children.
Oh my
And
goodness.
they dug deeper and realized that one of the reasons that polygamous marriage happens is partially financial, because that is a way to have an influx of cash into the family if you marry again. So they ended up designing a job skill intervention. And so when
Interesting.
I see a movement like that from drowning victims through that to job skills, I'm like, okay, something is happening that's unexpected.
Right. Right. Very powerful, Tabitha. Very powerful. So so a couple things I'm hearing for others who are joining us today, because we have people from around the world. One thing that I'm sensing that you do is you have this very, simplified but powerful design thinking methodology. You've created a train the trainer program so that you can empower community leaders to take it forward. You're staying connected to them, but you're also using collaboration. You were talking about some
Mhm.
of the organizations that you're connecting with in order to find the community leaders around the world to connect to. So I hear lots of different tactics that you're using to really scale. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. Chalmers, although we've been around 25 years, we're very lean. It's a small organization compared to the impact that we've had on the sector, on poverty alleviation. And we do that through working with denominations, U.S. organizations like Citygate or CAFO. They're international as well. So you're absolutely right. We scale through others. And when we're doing the online coaching, this is an example of a church we worked with in Illinois through Zoom. They were in a cohort with probably another 10 or 12 teams, 60 people. But they actually worked with churches in their area, and different churches outfitted these containers, shipping containers, into homes for people struggling with homelessness. And what was amazing is how much thought went into it over the design process, where the men were paying rent that was a percentage of whatever their monthly income had been that month. They passed over, rent day was a day of joy for these men.
Mm, interesting.
Um,
Talk more about that. What do you mean, rent day?
they were so excited to be able to pay something for their home because of the dignity that it
Yes,
gave them.
right,
They also stayed closely working. They needed lawyers and people from the city, all sorts of people to pull off this community, which is on the property of this ministry. But the men continue to speak into the design. They added lighting, community eating areas. It was a beautiful example of what you can do, that you can innovate new solutions, especially as you know, homelessness is just growing.
right.
Yeah, and I'd love, if I can, real briefly, to give a plug for experimentation.
Sure.
Um, a big part of the design phase is you create prototypes and you do experiments. So this is just an example of a prototype, a 6-frame storyboard. This is a group we first met online. They work in Liberia, and if you look at the first box, you see there's a wall keeping children from having education, healthcare, food, job skills training. And the only thing that will get them over the wall is paying school fees or being declared an orphan. So
Mm,
you see in the foreground this family, they cannot pay the school fees. And so families all over the world have done this. You have your child, you make the gut-wrenching decision to have your child declare themselves an orphan and walk up to that orphanage, because you know that that child will eat and go through school, and it's an awful problem. And this ministry, Red Meets Green, was working with those orphans, but they realized they wanted to do more than just work with orphans. They wanted to get to the root and wanted to reunite children with biological families or, extended families.
Mm-hmm.
So they created this storyboard. And the one thing they decided to experiment on initially was talking to both orphans, the little tiny person, and their caregivers or the families about their hopes and dreams. So that's exactly what they did. And this gentleman right here is Preston, and he was meeting with this mother, Elizabeth. Her daughter had already graduated from the orphanage. And he asked, "What do you have?" Again, that asset approach. And Miss Elizabeth said, "We have nothing." But her daughter said, "Can I say something?" And her daughter said, "Mama, you can make iron soap." And for me, it was just this story that I've told so many times, but I didn't know what else was coming. But that idea of, hey, we do have something. We can make iron soap. Well, fast forward to last spring, and Preston, the guy in the maroon shirt polo, came and was trained as a facilitator, went immediately back to Liberia and trained a lot of other people.
Right.
But he told me there was more to the story of Miss Elizabeth, and that now she has a thriving iron soap business.
I love it.
She employs people, active member in her church. Her family is thriving. And that is the power of experimentation.
Right.
Experiments can be
And
life-changing.
and collaboration, right? The
Absolutely.
fact that they were talking together and the daughter could say, "Mom, you
Yes,
could make iron soap." And so oftentimes I think we have to put people together because you may not see what someone else sees.
exactly. I love that. You said that perfectly. Well, that's kind of me. Thank you for listening to all that. I'll hand it back off to you, Jenny.
Right, right. So we have a great number of folks joining us today. If anyone has a question, feel free to post it in the chat, and then we can see if Tabitha can answer it for us. So I know she will, but so maybe while we're starting, what do you have coming up next? As we're waiting to see if questions come in from the audience through the chat, what do you have coming up next?
Yeah, the first week of September is exciting because we have groups starting in Uganda in all these communities. So we'll have our first community group starting to go through the 9-week process. And at the same time, I'm working with a partner in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And she's a lead trainer with us now, and she's training some more facilitators in Argentina. So I'm going to be remote on that one.
Okay.
But yeah, those are the next things coming up. And then we'll have more trips in Latin America and Africa coming up.
That sounds great. You talked about the fact that the scale is involving this, having a methodology, having the trainer, using those trained facilitators to scale from there. But everywhere you're talking about, I hear language issues. How are you navigating language barriers?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 4 languages if you include Ukrainian. But I work through translators.
Right.
In West Africa, we also have very cool equipment. It's like simultaneous translation. So we'll have 2 translators in the back translating into English or French. And we all have this over-the-ear thing in a lanyard with a box. And so as someone's speaking in French, we have simultaneous translation into English. So at some point in those 3 days, you start to believe that you can speak French because people are speaking French and you're understanding it. That
I
says you have
love
a
it.
good translator.
I love it. I love it. Well, what an extraordinary story. Tabitha, thank you so much for 2 things. One, for making extraordinary change happen in our world where it's needed the most. Thank you for all that. I know it's a missional purpose for you, and you do it in extraordinary ways. And thank you for joining us today and sharing with us leaders in the arena. We do have other programs coming up, but before we get there, it looks like we have a comment coming in, just some additional thank yous coming in. I'll just ask Ryan if you'll make sure we get those comments and we can share them with Tabitha after the meeting. So just a prompt to Ryan, who's helping us in the background, to make sure we have those comments of thanks coming in from our audience. But yes, as we think about what's coming up, exciting guest also ahead, igniting a transformation of culture with our good friends Kevin O'Meara, who is Executive Vice President at Shaw Industries. He leads transformation there, and we'll talk about his perspective of leading that in the arena. Also, some retired Unum executives, Tom White and Wendy Gibson, will be joining us talking about leading with perspective, bringing a breadth of leadership in a complex world. And then a good friend of ours from the West Coast talking about group intelligence and innovation, the hidden catalyst, coming up on October 3rd. Many more things happening at Bridge. We hope that you'll join us through our events program, or reach out to Tabitha via her LinkedIn or via Chalmers. I know she'd be happy to talk with you, or with me, jenny.whitener@bridgeinnovate.com. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.